Welcome. My name is James McAlpine. I'm the Executive Director of the Simsbury Historical Society. We're very happy to have you here tonight with us. You're going to find it informative, educational, and from what I know about Penn, entertaining as well.
They're setting the bar too high for me. Now, you're probably really bored by this. This is what you're bound to impress me.
I know you're not going to disappoint us. So the presentation is hosted tonight by the Simsbury Historical Society in partnership with the Lower Farmington River and Salmon Brook Wild and Scenic Committee, which has provided funding. So the Simsbury Historical Society, for those of you who don't know, was founded in 1911. We're a nonprofit organization dedicated to preserving and promoting the rich history of Simsbury. And we do so with the contributions of multiple volunteers, through memberships, charitable contributions, and occasionally grants, like what we received tonight for this program. So I encourage and invite you, if you like tonight's program, please consider becoming a member so that we can do more programs of this nature. So tonight's sponsor, the Lower Farmington River and Salmon Brook, Wild and Scenic Committee, is an advisory group consisting of several area organizations. Its contributions to the Farmington Valley are invaluable. We all enjoy, right, the recreational, the cultural, and the beauty aspects of the Farmington River and, of course, the sister, the Salmon Brook. So I'd like to have Mike Crammon come up and say hello and thank you for helping to fund tonight's program.
I'll make it very brief because you don't really care about me. So I'm Mike Crandon. I'm a resident of East Granby. And I'm the current chairperson of the Lower Farmington River and Salmon Brook Wild and Scenic Committee, which is a mouthful. So I'm just going to say, well, what is our organization and why are we funding something like this? As you know, the Farmington River runs through here. It's federally designated as a wild and scenic river. It's a partnership wild and scenic river. That means that there are 9 towns along the Lower Farmington that all get together and they send a rep into a committee to try and do things to help preserve, protect, and enhance the certain qualities of the river. I'm from East Granby. I'm the East Granby town rep, and I didn't step back fast enough, so that's why I get to be chairperson. You probably all know Sally Rieger. She was very instrumental for many years in getting this river designated. We were finally designated in 2019 after many years of study and work. The 9 towns are Avon, Burlington, Farmington, Simsbury, of course, East Granby, Bloomfield, and Windsor. Did I miss anybody on that part of the line? And then for the Salmon Brook, it's again East Granby, Granby, and Parkman. And I heard some people mention Canton, but Canton was part of the study group, but we gave away our part of the river to the upper river, wild and scenic. So the Canton is all part of that. And then you say, all right, so why are we interested in preserving this? You know, we have a committee and we get federal money to do things to try to help the river out. And we're focused on 5 things. And you can imagine one of them will be like things like water quality. And one of them is cultural landscape. And what's cultural landscape? Well, we're interested in the archaeology and the historical heritage of the river and making sure that we study it and bring that in front of people, because that will get people to engage with the river and understand what an important part it was in the past and going into the future. So I'm just going to make a plug for the federal part of it. We get the only money we get is federal money. So it comes through one of our partners, the National Park Service. And as you can imagine, we have money for this year, but who knows what's going to go forward. So if you have an interest in programs like this, you see value in things like this, I urge you to get a hold of your federal representatives and senators and voice your opinion that you just want to make sure they provide money in the future to keep our organization going. If you want to learn more about it, Sally brought some annual reports from fiscal year 23. It's a little old, but it you pick up a copy, it'll give you a good overview of the kind of things we've worked on. We've almost got the fiscal year 24 report done. We're a little slow so far getting things done. So I really appreciate such a big audience here to do this, and I hope that we've done something valuable for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you again, Mike and the entire committee for helping to fund tonight's program. And we feel your pain. The museums and many of the different cultural groups are in the same position. So Historical Society information, I know we handed out as we came in. So we appreciate your coming tonight. A couple quick housekeeping tips. If you haven't already, lower your cell phone, please do so. And before I introduce our speaker, I want to thank Ika Scully, our programs committee chair at the Simsbury Historical Society, for helping to put this presentation together and getting our speaker lined up for us. So thank you, Ika. And now tonight's presenter, Ken Faber, is Professor Emeritus at Central Connecticut State University, along with more than 40 years of experience in field archaeology. He is the author of several books, including Frauds, Myths, and Mysteries, Science and Pseudoscience in Archaeology, and Native American Archaeology in the Parks, a guide to heritage sites in our national parks and monuments. This evening, Ken will share with us some of the discoveries he and his team have made in archaeological digs here in the Farmington Valley, and what those discoveries tell us in terms of stories. So it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker. Please join me in welcoming Ken Faber.
Number one is I apologize. This was scheduled for a month ago, and I contracted COVID. And I tell you what, though, I was gonna come. I said, no, COVID's not gonna get me down. I'm coming and talking. And then I had this fantasy of like 2 weeks after that, being a big COVID outbreak, traced to Simsbury. I would have felt really, really bad about that. So I just, second, you'll notice I have all these colorful bracelets on. Molly, who is 7, Ellie, who is 5, made these for me tonight, and I had to promise that I would wear them. I hope they're not too distracting. But if I take them off, there's a lot of trouble. Listen, this is, what a great, I just love the size of this crowd. This is fantastic. I have spoken to much larger crowds, but I've also showed up after a long drive to a place where very few people showed up. I will give you my worst story, my horror story. I was invited to give a lecture at a small college in Massachusetts, Anna Maria College. And I arrived, and the venue was beautiful. It was a newly renovated theater. It's 250 seats. And outside the theater were platters of veggies and veggie dip and cookies, and it was great. I began the lecture at 7 o'clock, and at 7 o'clock in the theater with 250 seats, there were 6 people. Oh. When I ended, there were 6 people. 2 of the people in attendance were students at the college. 2 were faculty at the college. 1 was the dean of students who had invited me to come, and the 6th was just some guy in the neighborhood who was walking his dog, saw the lights on and said, what's going on? And he walked in and stayed for the whole lecture. So that says something. All right. Listen, that was sad, but you know what? If nobody showed up tonight, I would have given the lecture anyway. I mean, people would have walked by, would have seen tears streaming down my face, but I would have given that lecture. The next day, the dean called me, and she apologized, and she took the blame for it. She said, look, Ken, I'm really sorry. I double booked on campus that night. And I said, oh, okay. By the way, if you do lectures and somebody tells you, and not a lot of people showed up, they say, well, something else was going on, don't ever ask them what was going on. You don't want to know. But I did ask. On campus that night, there was a guy dressed as a clown making balloon animals in the student center. That's what this was. Obviously tonight, there are no balloon animal making clowns in the greater Simsbury area. So hooray, hooray, hooray. You know, there's a missed opportunity there though. Imagine if I would have learned how to make balloon animals, but not animals, sculptures that were archaeologically themed. Like pyramids, arrowheads.
Jay Beaver.
I would have the market absolutely cornered for that. Maybe next time. Right. Archaeologists we're historians in a sense, but we do things kind of backwards. We encounter the most recent stuff first, and we literally dig down into deeper strata to find the older and older stuff. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to do kind of a combination. I'm going to start with the historical baseline. Here's what we know about the native population of the Farmington Valley as of 1640, 1650, 1700. And then, once we've established who was here and what happened to them, now let's look back at their ultimate ancestors who arrived in the Farmington Valley at least 10,500 years ago. So there's a long, long history of a native population here. And then I'll circle back at the end to talk about the Tuxes, about the living Tuxes. They are still here. They're not extinct. They're not a people who has disappeared in the dimness of history. They are still around. They're just not around so much in Simsbury, Avon, Farmington, and the rest of the Farmington Valley. So let's get into it. We'll see if my remote works. It does. Every archaeological project needs a good acronym. When I was at the University of Connecticut as a grad student, Bob Grady, who was one of my brilliant colleagues, student, came up with this. The Public Archaeology Survey Team passed. That's sweet. That is really sweet. You know? You want an acronym that says who you are. So when I started digging in the Farmington Valley, started a research project in the late 1970s, I was like 7 years old. I was like super advanced for my age. I was trying to come up with acronyms for doing archaeology in the Farmington area. And this just wasn't gonna work.
Oh, no.
T-shirts, that's not gonna work on a t-shirt. Stationery, hi, we're from Fart. People are not gonna let you in their houses, they're not gonna let you walk. So I ended up with, it's not nearly as funny, but it's the Farmington River Archaeological Project. It doesn't mean anything, but at least you can pronounce it. It's not like the Connecticut Archaeological Survey, CAS, SAS. How do you pronounce that? And I thought I'm clean with that, but somebody did say, well, what happens if you expand into the Connecticut River Valley? See, you figure it out. So we're just going to stick with Frat. Now here's the deal. We're going to look at the historic baseline. What do we know about the native population of the Farmington Valley when Europeans first entered into the valley? People are settling in Hartford, 1635, 1636. There's the Dutch fort, 1633. At some point after that, doing their walkabouts, looking for more land, looking for more resources, the people in Hartford came west to what's technically a volcanic escarpment. Steep slope down to this enormous verdant valley, which they must have perceived as being set aside by Providence for their use. The problem is, though, if they had looked really carefully, they would have seen smoke curling up from the probably hundreds of wigwams that dotted the valley, because there was a substantial population of native people in that Farmington Valley. Well, so they went back to the Connecticut River, where they were living in Hartford, and they asked around, how do we get a hold of this land? We really want this land. And there was one native person, his name was Sequasit, who raised his hand and said, oh, that valley over there? Yeah, I'm in charge of that. I can sell that to you. He didn't live in the Farmington Valley. He had no real legal reason why he would sell that land, but he did. We don't really know if, either for the English set of laws or for native set of laws, if what he did was like kosher, which has that for a mixed metaphor, right? If it was legal. But English people began moving into the valley soon thereafter. That dates to 1640. The reason we know that is we know there was a treaty signed in 1640, call it a treaty, call it a document, call it an agreement between Sequasit and the English people living in the Connecticut River Valley, giving them the land. Here's the problem, vexing problem. That document is gone. We don't have it. It has never been found. What we had are subsequent documents starting in 1645 that refer back to the 1640 document. So we know it existed. We have a vague idea of what it said. At least it said, okay, Englishmen, you can have all of this land. But it's very clear early on that the Tunguses were never consulted. The Tunguses had no idea why these Englishmen had moved into their homeland. And they didn't mind it at first, because they felt, oh, this is great, we can trade with them. Their presence here will be protective because the Mohawks, who are kind of mean guys, they probably won't mess with us if we have English people living amongst us. What the Tunguses didn't understand, probably from a basic cultural perspective, was that these English people had a concept called private property, which meant that they could put fences around property, and now you weren't allowed on that property, even if, well, your favorite fishing hole was just on the other side, or if you're hunting and the deer have just gone over the fence, or if it's just the way you travel to your fields. Tunguses did not recognize that. It was not a cultural, it wasn't part of their culture. And that's where problems arose. So let's look at documents that are housed in the Connecticut archives. You can look at these online. It's a great resource. So it's treaties and deeds and military records and trading records and lawsuits. Original documents that are all kept together in the basement of the Connecticut Library. You used to be able to look at the original documents, and then people started stealing them to sell them. Especially if there was like the name of some hotshot in history. Oh, so these days, it's very difficult to see the originals, but you can access them all online, which isn't the same thing, but whatever. This is just an index. These are indexed under Indians. It's the Indian series. So if there is a document that relates to Native people living in the Farmington Valley, it's indexed here, and then you can find the original document. And that brings us to this. This is the oldest document we got, 1645. This, it is ordered that the plantation called Tunguses shall be called Farmington, and that the bounds thereof shall be as following, and it lays out a boundary. It's not just Farmington. We're talking about what ultimately is 300 square miles. And I'll show you a map that includes the towns all around us here, south of us, that are represented in that original boundary layout. So that's 1645. So people are moving in. English people are moving in. Very clearly, the Tunguses are looking around saying, who are these guys? And why are they here? And why are they putting fences around lands that are part of our homelands? And so the English decide, sounds like a good plan, we better make an agreement directly with the Tunguses. You know, they live here, it's their land. The problem is, in the 1650 document, it just makes legal, it reifies that 1640 document. So the thing that was that was being questioned, who gave you this land and is that legal? The English in 1650 say, well, no, that's a given, that's righteous. And so the very thing that was being challenged was made concrete in that 1650 document. If you look on the bottom right here, these are signatures of, that's John Hayes, but there's also Pappas, who was a sachem, a chief, a leader of the Tunguses, and Ahamo. And Ahamo's mark looks like a bow and arrow, which I think is really pretty cool. All throughout here, the Tunguses, until the 1730s, are saying, okay, we agree to this. But what are they agreeing to? They're not agreeing to giving up all their land. They think they're agreeing to allowing the English to come and live among them. That's not what the English want. 1650 treaty, it says, the Indians have given up all of the lands in the valley in the 1640 treaty, with the exception of, quote, unquote, encompassed with the creek, an area encompassed with the creek and trees. That's a place called Indian Neck, and we'll get back to that. So all throughout this, there are about 100 acres in Farmington, today south of the sewage treatment plant, called Indian Neck, that again and again and again in these documents, the English are saying, oh, no, that's yours forever. You may have noticed that there's not like a casino, a Tungus casino in Farmington, because in fact, even though they said it again and again, it didn't hold. So 1672, the Tunguses, probably with help from the English, filed a formal complaint with the General Court in Hartford, saying, no, this isn't working. We have less and less land. The English are coming in greater numbers. We are being pushed out of our homeland. And so in 1673, the English produce another document that again doesn't help the Tunguses at all. It helps us though, because there's a map. There's a map of the Farmington Valley. Yep, south is at the top. By the 16th, 17th century, north usually was at the top of maps, but not completely. It blows my mind, but it's true. Pointing north at the top, there's no rationale for doing that. There's no up or down in space, so north could be the opposite. But in any event, this map has south at the top, and it says Farmington, this is Farmington now, everything is related to Round Hill, which is a 60-foot tall hill in the middle of a meadow, and it's 10 miles to the south, 5 miles north, 3 miles east, and 8 miles west, with the opportunity to improve the land. That means cut down trees and put farms in for another 5 miles. That's 300 square miles. When I first arrived in Connecticut and started the Farming River Project and read this, I said, oh, I can measure everything according to Round Hill. I gotta go find Round Hill. So I went into driving up and down Route 4 in Farmington. I don't see a big 60-foot tall hill in the middle of the meadow. So I went into town. I said, where's Round Hill? And they said, literally, oh, we moved it. All of the fill where the sewage treatment plant is, right off of Route 4 there, that all came from Round Hill. So today, that's Farmington. All right, you're looking at Farmington, Avon, Burlington, Plainville, a bunch of different, Southington, Bristol, Woolton. All of that is Farmington. That's what the English said Sequosit gave us. And you guys can live in a little village that's right here. About 100 acres. That's Round Hill right there. Does this hurt your head as much as it hurts mine? Round Hill Square. Round Hill. Round. Round Hill Square. This is an old photograph. I don't know if it still looks like that, but it's a little bunch of businesses and stores there where Round Hill used to be. I like better this. This is from the 1830s, all right? So now here's this guy sitting on Round Hill, and that's Farmington. Do y'all recognize that? That's the fourth point. That the first Congregational Church in Farmington was built in 1771, I think. So you recognize these buildings. It says northwest view of Farmington. I don't know. No, he's looking east, right? If he's on Round Hill, he's looking northeast, not northwest, but whatever. But it gives you an idea. There's the river, I think, is supposed to be right there. That's what they were talking about. That was clearly visible. It's a glacial feature. And so everything was measured by rods according to that. They tell me in these documents where Indian Neck was located, and I can measure that out. Yeah, it's right where the river bends. It's behind where the sewage treatment plant now is. And we actually found artifacts that support that. More about that in a little bit. 1673, we're talking about Round Hill. It's understood that the land in Ye Indian Neck, which Ye Indians then possessed of, doth yet remain firm and good to Ye Indians, their heirs, as firmly as ever, though not mentioned in the above deed of sale. They have been given to the town of Farmington, being rounded on page 2, blah, blah, blah. We hereby declare that the town of Farmington hath neither right, title, claim, or interest in aforesaid land by the above deed. Well, that was true for the town, but for individuals, they didn't read that. They said, no, you know what, we would like some of that land. It's really good farmland, and ultimately the Tunguses lost control of it. More about that in a little. 65 years later, in 1738, you're going to see on this list names of some very important Wadsworth people in Connecticut. The Tunguses are naming names. Enough of this bull. These are the people stealing our land on Indian Neck. William Wadsworth, John L. Sucker, William Hooker, Deacon John Hart, Benjamin Porter, Josiah Hart. So they're naming names. They said, these guys got to be stopped. And they come up with what I think is just absolutely brilliant writing, probably helped by Englishmen. The Tonsus requested in that document that the encroachments of the Englishmen may be removed, and ye right and property of ye poor memorialists, the Tonsus were calling themselves Indians, may not be sacrificed to satisfy the avaricious humor of designing Englishmen. Isn't that great? I mean, that's really great phrasing. But and later on in that document, they actually say out loud, we are not strong enough or powerful enough to otherwise contend, so we throw ourselves in the mercy of the court. You know what they're saying? We're not going to war. This is not going to be a war, not because it's not justified, but because we don't have the numbers or the weapons to win that war. And so they throw themselves on the mercy of the court. The court, the General Court in Hartford, basically says, too bad, so sad, we'll buy you out. The Tonsus at that point, for the most part, moved either to Stockbridge, the Indian Reservation, Stockbridge, Mass., and a lot of them joined the Brotherton movement. Samson Occam, who was Mohegan, a Christian Mohegan, who was in the valley. He kept a diary and has lots and lots of references to walking around in the Farmington Valley and encountering Indians and trying to convert them to Christianity. He got a bunch of those folks to move west onto the Oneida Reservation in New York, and they ran into the same problems there of losing land. And so ultimately, the Tonsus, who are still among us, moved to Wisconsin. And we'll get back to that in a bit. You got to give John Hooker some props here. He wrote a letter of support for the natives. This is 1738, so this may certify all who doth remain concerned that there is in Farmington a certain tract of land within the common field in a place going by the name of Indian Neck, containing by estimation about 90 acres, which have always been esteemed land belonging to the Indians belonging to Farmington. So here's Reverend Hooker saying, hey, you know what, the Indians are getting a bad deal here. That is their land, but to no avail. I mean, ultimately, they got paid off. But that is not the end of their story, but it's the end of their presence in the Farmington Valley, a presence that we can trace back now to close to 11,000 years. By the way, this is ages ago. This is a plowed field behind the sewage treatment plant where my folks found lots of flint, they found a couple of arrowheads, they found a lot of chippage, and they found English ceramics. So that certainly dates to the 17th century. So this more than likely is the location of that village they're talking about in old documents. This is Indian Neck. We have spent, it was 50 years, doing the site survey in the Farmington Valley, looking for evidence of those people who preceded the Tonsus, who descendants were the Tonsus. For a while, I would hand out questionnaires to people who lived along the river and basically said, have you ever found any artifacts along the river? And we would get lots and lots. The Farmington Valley people are amazing in being responsive and interested. Most of my colleagues who would send out these surveys would get about 10% return. This is with self-addressed antitypes. In the Farmington Valley, I got more than 50% of people responded, even if they didn't find anything. My favorite, though, was, and I won't talk towns, I won't talk people, but there was one landowner who didn't respond, and they had a large amount of land, and both his neighbors to the north and south had found artifacts, evidence of the native people. And so I ran into it one day, and I said, did you get that survey? I said, no. He said, oh, yeah, I did. I said, oh. And he said, yeah, but we've never found any artifacts. I said, oh, that's okay. Negative information is important to know that you have it. It's weird because your neighbors to the north and south have found stuff. And he said, really? And I said, yeah. He said, no, we've never found any artifacts. Lots of arrowheads, though. That's my bad. That's my fault for not saying, have you ever found any arrowheads? Because, true, this is a true story. I said, yeah, well, arrowheads, that's kind of what I mean by artifacts. And he said, oh, I thought it meant like pyramids and mummies and stuff in Avon. That would be a story. The room would be twice as crowded if I hadn't done that. So we've had a lot of help. A lot of folks who grew up in the valley, whose parents were picking up arrowheads, were picking up things as as they walk the fields, and who are more than willing to share the knowledge that they have over decades and decades of that interaction with the land and native history. And tons of stuff. Now, I will grant you that boxes of artifacts are of limited use to us. I mean, they tell us, say, where we were here, we can date some of these things. For example, that's probably about 500 years old, or this is more like 3,000 or 4,000 years old, based on the style. You know, if you see a car drive by, you go, oh, that's a 1960s car. Oh, that's a Model T. You can guess the ages, styles change, technology changes. We can do the same thing with this. So, all of these are relatively recent. These are actual arrowheads and not spear points. We're talking now Granby and Avon and Farmington and Simsbury. How's that? This is amazing. This is a woman whose husband plowed the field. This is a Granby for years and years and years, and every time he plowed, you'd find axes and adzes and pestles. Really exciting stuff. And we're looking at, now this is a range of material dated from 10,500 years ago, right up until the period of European contact. It also tells us that the native folks who lived around here were not insulated, they weren't isolated. They traded, they moved around, because some of the raw materials we're seeing here are not native to the Farmington Valley. So we've got some of this flint is probably, we're looking at west, and this and that, this one, west of the Hudson River. So 80, 90, or 100 miles. There's Coxsackie flint and Normanskill flint. These are areas west of the Hudson. So are they moving there in a seasonal round? That's possible. Are they trading great distances? That's another thing we'll talk about in a little bit, because there's definitely evidence of long distance trade. And you know, it's amazing the things you encounter when you just ask people. You ever found anything as you're hiking around in the valley? And these are the kinds of things that we've been exposed to. So we have to go out, once we get that information, the data that individual people have encountered in their daily lives, putting in a swimming pool, plowing a field, putting in tomato plants, putting in the footings for a deck. We need to go out into the field, we need to go out into the valley itself and ground truth that. Is there anything left? Is that material still available? And so when people plow their field and they let us walk through those furrows, that picks up, 18 inches of soil, and if there's anything that's there buried by flooding, we are likely to find it. And dig we must. It was in Con Edison in New York that their signs used to say, dig we must. Well, that's part of our deal as well. And so we dig test holes. Every 10 meters, you put in a hole with a shovel, screen all that soil, 1/4-inch mesh or 1/8-inch mesh hardware cloth. And this is in West Simsbury. And even little broken pieces of stone. I know that's a stone called hornfels, which the native people knew. A lot of folks will talk about the native people in the Farmington Valley being these Stone Age people. Anybody who uses that term pejoratively, like as an insult, oh, primitive, I'll give you 2 rocks, make something. You won't be able to. The ability to know, this is practical knowledge, geology, geography, lithology, and mechanics. They have to know what rocks break well and what rocks don't. If I gave you a piece of sand, I used to teach a course in experimental archaeology where students would go and collect, you see this guy right here? He took that course, right? And people would come in that first day and say, get me some rocks. Just go out and get rocks, bring them in, and you're gonna try to make something out of it. Well, because Connecticut had a lot of sandstone, a lot of kids bring in sandstone. A lot of kids, after a day of bagging sandstone, say, I think I'm going to be a sociology major. Because you can't make anything out of sandstone. It's too crumbly. It just falls apart. You have to understand how rock breaks, how different rocks break differently. And you have to know that basalt can be good, it can be lousy. Hornfels, which is metamorphosed sandstone. Now, the tongues couldn't have told you it was metamorphosed sandstone, but they would have said where that black rock overrode the red rock, in some cases, it changed it. It made it different. It made it better. And they knew that. And then they knew exactly the angle at which to hit a rock to make it thin, to make it sharp, to make it durable. And they knew exactly where to put an antler tine to finish that off, to make it symmetrical. I'm going to show you some absolutely gorgeous. It's art and it's science. And these people were really good at it, the ancestors of the historical places. This is Mark Banks, that's your map. Where's Mark? That's the map you produced. Every one of those red diamonds is a site surveyed by Mark Banks. All right, back to the beginning. All right, this is a chart you'll find in every article and every book about archaeology on the East Coast. And the numbers may be a little bit different. And certainly the native people wouldn't have said, oh yeah, yesterday it was the Paleolithic period, but starting on March 5th, it was the Archaic. It doesn't work that way. But we have, we're people, we're scientists, we like to divide stuff up into these packages. And so we start with the Paleolithic period, which is 12 to 9,000 years ago. This is the earliest settlement of Connecticut. As the glaciers, this was the glacial period, the glaciers melted off, the climate changed. If you were in Connecticut 10,500 years ago, it wouldn't be anything like what you experience today. Based on the pollen rain, the pollen falling on the top of Rogers Lake, an old line, and then filtering down to the bottom and becoming preserved in those layers. The pollen rain falling on Rogers Lake 10,500 years ago doesn't look like the pollen rain falling in Connecticut today. You know what it looks like? The north slope of the Canadian tundra. There are no oak trees. There are precious few pine. It's mostly sedges. And there are no deer or beaver or raccoon. There's caribou. And up there, muskox. So if we get out of our time machine in Avon 10,500 years ago and walk into what's called the Brian Jones site. My great late colleague, Brian Jones, died way too young. But the site was named for him because he kind of inspired the excavation here in Avon, where the new bridge is over the river at Old Farms. Yeah, right, exactly. That's what they found a site that's 10,500 years ago. We go on a time machine to get out there. What you're looking at looks and feels like northern Canada at that period. So very different from today. No caribou bones were found at that site, but in New York State, in a couple of places, sites dating to that period, it's caribou that these folks are looking. So very, very different. Just throw this in, this was an amateur archaeologist years and years ago found this at what was then the Bel Campo golf course, and now it's Blue Fox Run. And they were doing, they were doing landscaping or whatever, they let him on the property. And he found what are called fluted points. It's got a channel, a little concave channel on both faces. East Hafton. Spear points like that are found all over North America, dating to between 12,500 and maybe 10,000 years ago. So Connecticut, we're kind of a backorder here. We're at the end of the line of people coming into the continent from the Beringia, from Northwest Canada, Northeast Asia. But they're part of that same group of people because their technology is very similar. And these are from Sarah Sportman photographs of the excavation there. They did an amazing job. And these are the kinds of, these are the bases of fluted points. You could go to Maine and find the Vail site, exactly those kinds of points. You can go to the Galt site in Texas and find points that look like that. You can find them in Alaska, you can find them in California, you can find them all over North America. These are people adapted to late glacial or early post-glacial environments. Very different from today, but they were resilient, they were brilliant and adapted to changes in their environment. And their ancestors became extraordinarily diverse depending on where they were, what the environments that were established in the post-glacial period were like. Now, a little closer to home, here's Alsop Meadow, which is in Avon. 5,000 years ago, in a little field, there was a small encampment of native people, right up and hard fast against the Farmington River. This is what remains of a fireplace that provided us with charcoal for dating the site. That should have a scale, it doesn't. I can tell you, oh, well, it's well, no, it's only a couple of inches. That's basalt. I have tried to make tools out of basalt semi-successfully, and it's really, really difficult. This is amazing work with a very kind of iffy material. But that's Hornfels. And again, that's only a couple. I got a picture of this one in a lab shot so you can see it a little more clearly. That's a drill. Being a Stone Age people, they weren't really, they used other materials. Stone is resilient, so it lasts, so it's overrepresented. They were very, very good at it. Very highly skilled. So that's the drill. This is centimeters of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's a couple inches right there. This is a spear point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So again, 2 inches. This is 5,000 years old. If I hafted this onto a shaft today, this is sort of morbid, but I could kill something with it. I mean, it's that sharp. It's maintained its sharpness. So at this point, these folks are hunting deer, they're hunting small mammals, and they're collecting seeds and they're fishing in the river. That's 5,000 years old. 4,000 years ago, this is, archaeology is like, how do I describe it? It's like, the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland, how it disappears little by little by little until there's nothing. Reverse that. So we start with little, and as we remove the soil, more and more and more is exposed. This starts right on the side of Old Farms Brook. There's nothing but darkened soil. So what's that about? Why is that important? As we dug down under it, so wait a minute, there's stones. There are no stones anywhere. It's floodplain soil. And yet there's this surface of stones, so we expanded it until there's this, essentially, a platform of stones. And all mixed into that soil is charcoal and bits of bone. It's a roasting platform. It's a platform on which an animal was cooked. And what's pretty cool is, right, there's that platform. You see my white arrow is pointing to something right there. And what it's pointing to is that. It's a spear point, and it's imperfect. The tip is broken. Now, I will grant you that there's some speculation here on my part, but it's found right next to a hearth, a platform, on which a deer was cooked. It's not much of a jump to say we've got the smoking gun, and that's a weird metaphor, and a broken spear point. It's not asking too much to take that extra step and say maybe that tip broke when it hit when it entered the animal's body, hit a bone, they pulled it out, threw it aside, butchered the deer, and cooked it, and they ate it. And that's 4,000 years ago. I always like to give a shout out to my friend Walter Landgraf. Walter was a naturalist and a teacher at in Barkhamsted, at Woodstead, that area. Great guy. Walter, I'm more than glad to admit that Walter, what's the old expression? Walter probably forgot more than I'll ever know about the history of the Farmington Valley. And this is Walter. That smile lights up the room because he's just discovered something that's very important. I'll show you more. He's got a couple of rocks here. This is Andrea Rand, who was with him. Whoa, these boulders here, what are those? Most people would walk by those in the woods, you wouldn't think twice. But Walter and Andrea knew something, they felt it. They said, whoa, this is a rare mineral. The mineral is called steatite, commonly called soapstone. It's called soapstone because it's got a lot of talc in it and it feels really soft and slippery. You can't make a spear point out of soapstone, but you can make a ball, and you can make a platter, and you can make a ladle. It's fireproof, it's waterproof, and it does not experience thermal shock. So if it's really cold and you put something really hot in it, or you put it on the fire, it's fine. It takes it very well. You can buy wood stoves now that have panels of soapstone in them. Look at they're polished and they look like marble, but it's the same material. Well, Walter unfortunately died too young, and Andrea, whose plan was to excavate this site, sort of handed it over to me. She did some of the excavations in the early years between like 2011 and 2017, 2019. And that's a photograph from like 2006 when Andrea and Walter were there. Maybe it's earlier than that. Something like that. So that's what's exposed. After we excavated, that's what you're looking at. That channel is a carving. That channel is a carving. And what they're doing is they're isolating that form, and then working on some more. I got better pictures. And what they're going to do is that's going to end up looking like a mushroom, upside, a mushroom. And the narrow part is what's connecting it to the quarry itself. And then they're going to drill through that, pull it out, and hollow it out. So here we are excavating the site. That dust is 3,000-year-old soapstone dust. Still in place where somebody, there are no OSHA regulations because my understanding is it's not really good to put that stuff in. But they were carving out that soapstone, leaving that ash there, that dust there, and then removing those fragments, those forms, preforms, and then bringing them up to a little rock overhang where they made the final objects. This is 3,000 years old. That's what it looks like from a drone up on top. So you've got, that's a meter six, so you're looking at about 7 feet across. That's channeled out, so that's carved out. That's carved out. But you notice there actually are 5 unfinished, unharvested bowl forms. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So they are very effectively and very efficiently removing all of that material, forming the bowls, half forming them in place, and then extracting them for further use. Here's just some shots of that. What's really cool now is that I missed it because I had COVID. The folks, the Friends of the American Legion and People State Forest, the Barkhamsted Historical Society and the state have built a viewing platform around that end. And so you can, in People State Forest, you can walk a short trail, maybe 20 minutes, and you can get to the platform and actually look down on this amazing 3,000-year-old artifact, artist's conception, and what that would look like. We found the tools used for carving out those bowls. Soapstone is super soft, about as soft as your fingernails. Quartz is 5 times harder, so with quartz picks, they carved out those bowl forms. And we found part of the bowl. So you see there's the lug right there, there's the round edge. Unfortunately, about 1/3 to 1/2 of it is missing. That's what it looks like. I'm not going to say it's pretty, but it's effective. 3,000 years ago. So now there's a question, right? Why would people go to the trouble of starting 5 soapstone bowls? Soapstone is available only in a very few areas. It's not widely available. It's really patchy. So if you live where there's soapstone, you're advantaged because you've got raw material that other people want. Think oil, think lithium for batteries. So we're gonna hold on to that. It's a value. We'll trade that. You want to go hunt deer, pick some deer hides? We don't have to do that. We'll give you soapstone in trade. I think that 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, that was a really important part of the economy of the Farmington Valley. 3,000 years ago, something happens. It's called the disruptive innovation. Clay pottery, ceramics goes in. And in my imagination, a bunch of people working really hard, carving these out, and a couple of people walk in with like clay pots in their backpacks. And they're saying, well, prices are going up on these materials, by the way. We're going to need 5 deer hides and not just 4. And then these people going, oh, really? See what I got? Clay's everywhere. You know, you can have those pieces of soapstone. Now there's a learning curve, okay, so there's a little bit of a challenge there, but once you've perfected that, soapstone goes way down in value. People just don't need it anymore. And I think that's what happens. I think these people are literally at mid-build when they find out it's hardly worth the effort to remove that because it's just not going to get you the same amount that it used to get you. So even 3,000 years ago, in the Farmington Valley, we have economic principles at work. Because, yeah, I mean, they're people. This is, I got a phone call from Mr. Ron Glazier in Granby. This is years ago, saying, I've got like these 16 huge blades that I picked up where I've got a drainage pipe and there was a big storm and it cleared out the soil and these things popped up. And he described them to me and they're so big. And no, okay, Mr. Glazier, I'll get there when I have a chance. And I just kind of blew them off. Braids. He called me again. He said, do you want to come and see these? I go, yeah, sure. And you know, it's an occupational hazard. You got to. I once drove down to Old Line because a person there told me that she had found a petrified elephant's foot in her backyard. So, but that's like, you know, once bitten, twice shy, whatever it is. It's like, oh yeah, sure. I went to Mr. Glazier's house, and he had on his beautiful maple dining room table 16 of the largest artifacts I've ever seen in the Farmington Valley. Gorgeous spear points. And so he invited me to come and dig some more. And again, being smart, I said, Ron, you probably got them all. Yeah, there's not going to be any more down there. We've had 14 more when he convinced us to come and dig. And these are actually in place. These are huge. And there was charcoal. And I think it was a ceremonial site. These things the material's way too soft to actually cut anything with. So I think it was somebody, could be a man or a woman, who made spear points and they were just showing off. Look at how cool this is. And there was burning in there. This happened, we're looking at like the year AD 400, maybe 1600 years ago.
How long ago?
1600 years ago.
No.
Size?
The size.
Oh, the size, we're looking at anything from 4 inches to more than 8 inches in length, which is the average spear point in Connecticut. You're looking at 2.5, 3 inches, maybe 4. So these were gigantic compared to that. I had a wonderful artist, Noelle Coots, who was working for me at the time, who she drew each one of them and then drew one on edge. Let me tell you, making a tool like this with an edge that's that straight and that thin, it's like, I don't think I've ever made anything that thin or that straight. It's just astonishing. And beautifully made. All right, now, just because we're entering into the historic period doesn't mean that archaeology stops. Connecticut native people in the Farmington Valley lived here for a long time and still live here in some numbers after the coming of Europeans. And the site that I worked on, the one that's nearest to my heart, is the Barkhamsted Lighthouse. Again, that's an archaeological preserve that we have signage up. The $5 story, Narragansett Indian man James Chatham, from Block Island through Rhode Island, comes to Connecticut, falls in love with and marries a white woman, Mary Barber. Against her father's wishes, they disappear into the woods of the Farmington Valley, the wilderness. They make their final stand along the Farmington River in what is today Barkhamsted, off of what today's East River Road. And they don't just survive, they thrive. Mary has 8 children, 7 of whom live to adulthood. 6 of those 7 marry as other people move into the area, including Tunguses. There's at least one Tungus. There are Mohegans. There are other Narragansetts. There are people. There are at least one African American and some white folks, some Europeans marry into the family, and there are children and grandchildren and great grandchildren. Humor me here. My interest in archaeology has always been fueled by my curiosity. Yeah, this is cool. But it's all been about me, right? It's been selfish. It's, hey, I'm a college professor. I have students. I have funding. I'm going to dig stuff up because I like playing in the dirt. I always have, and I guess I always will. Then this happened. So we're at the lighthouse site, 17th century, 18th century, 19th century, and we're on TV. So there's like a human interest story on local television where sitting on the side of the road at lunch, pickup truck comes into the area where we are, And this guy gets out of the truck with his dog Rags. I don't remember what I had for breakfast. I remember Rags. And I'm sitting on the ground, and this guy comes up to me. I mean, you're big, just like this. Are you comfortable? Because I was not comfortable. And I didn't know, I said, will my crew defend me? No way. So I stood up and said, can I help you? And he looked at me, put out his hand. He said, shake my hand. And so he did. And then he smiled and he said, you just shook hands with one of them. And he pointed up to the hill. I said, what?
Did what?
He said, you just shook hands with one of them. I am a descendant of Jimmy Chaga, the Narragansett. So I was blown away. I mean, I kind of knew they were still around, but to actually encounter one. I asked him, when's the last time you came up and saw him? I'll bring you up, I'll show you what we're doing. And he said, well, I've never been here. And I said, where do you live? I live in Winstead, which is like, 5-minute drive. I said, what? I'm naive and I'm stupid and I apologize for it. And I said, how come you've never been here? And he looked at me. He got very serious and he said, around here, being a descendant of those drunken Indians is not exactly a point of pride. It broke my heart. I said, what do you mean? But then he said something, please, please, please don't misinterpret what I'm about to say. I take zero credit for this because I didn't intend this to happen. But he said, but now that a college professor is studying my family, maybe I should rethink that. And again, maybe I should have known that would mean something. Whatever. I brought him up to the site, walked around, I put on my professor pants, showed him all the objects that we had been digging, and I took him to the cemetery. I'm going to show you the cemetery again in a second. Where there are stones, upright stones, where the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, put a fence around the gravestones in the 1930s and put a sign up, don't dig here, there are no implements buried. So I took him up there, the fence is gone, and I'm lecturing about, well, we don't know who's buried here specifically, if James and Molly, they're probably here, probably their children, and I look up, and this bear of a man is crying. And I thought I had insulted him. I didn't know what mistake I had made. I said, oh, Mr. Ellis, his name is Raymond Ellis, I am so sorry. And he said to me, don't be sorry. Thank you for bringing me home. That's mind-blowing. I mean, as an archaeologist, that just doesn't happen. That moment changed my whole perspective. My curiosity should, that's important, nothing wrong with that. But here I have an opportunity to serve a family to help them retrieve the history that my skill set will allow me to give them. And I have Mr. Ellis to thank for that. He passed away a bunch of years ago, but it was always one of my proudest moments. Then I got a phone call from Louisiana, a woman named Connie Dubois. And Connie said, oh, I'm so sorry, I know you're a busy professor. What? I got an office hours, nobody comes and visits me, I'm bored to tears. And she said, my dad, I grew up in Indiana, she said, and my father always told me we were descendants of an Indian tribe in Connecticut. And an article about your dig has shown up, picked up by the Associated Press, picked up in Indiana. My dad read it, and he said, that's us. And so Connie contacted me. And she had more genealogy, and it was, oh yeah, I know exactly who you are. You're a 9th generation descendant of James and Molly. Connie has become a friend and a colleague. As we've done the site, this is the artifacts we found in the site, pottery and pipes, buttons, all dating to the period of occupation by Connie's ancestors. A gun flint and a frizzen, part of the mechanism, the firing mechanism for a flintlock gun. You know how to work, I'm gonna touch you anyway. Oops. Back. Maybe we could go back. Found people who lived in town whose great-grandparents knew the people at the lighthouse and who traded with them. And these baskets were made by people in the lighthouse. The US Census in 1840 says, oh yeah, the people at the lighthouse were basket makers and broom makers. So we know all these connections. The baskets, there are about 25 or 30 of them, are now housed at the Barkhamsted Historical Society. Fragments of a house that probably looked like that. This is a charcoal furnace. They were making money producing charcoal for the iron industry. Cemetery. And this is the picture I wanted to show you. When Connie came up, she's been visited a number of times, and she's become sort of the linchpin of the family, the genealogist, who has put together hundreds and hundreds of descendants of the lighthouse people. Here's Connie at the cemetery. Her father had passed away, but he knew that we were doing this work. Connie brought a photograph of her father and asked me, was it my right to say no? Of course, if she could bury the photograph in the cemetery. And yeah, of course, she just moved the soil and put some soil over it. And it was super meaningful. Connie, in 2015, organized a reunion of the family. People came from California and Massachusetts and Louisiana and Indiana, and they all came to visit, most for the first time, the place where their family really started, with James Chaga and Molly Barber. And so I was privileged to give them a tour of the site and be photographed. There's the ugly bug is right over there. There's Connie. Mr. Roberts, who's a town historian. And those people all are, this incredible, diverse mixture of people, are all the descendants of James and Molly. They had a parade in 2015, and again, one of my proudest moments. I was situated along the parade route, so I wanted to take pictures. And I'm standing there, and Connie comes over and grabs me and said, "Kitty." She's from Louisiana. What can I tell you? What can I say? So she always refers to me as Kitty. When I sign my emails to her, I write my name Kinny, because that's what, it's my name. And she said, I want you to meet some people in the staging area. So I met some people, and I was getting nervous because I didn't want to lose my spot along the route. And so I said, Connie, I'm sorry, I got to go and get pictures. And she goes, no, you're not sitting. You're marching with us. I know, Connie, this is from a family. Connie, right then and there, adopted me into the family. I actually have an identity card. She printed up cards, people of the Chatham family, and I am officially a member of the Chatham family. 2025, this year, they're coming back. Unfortunately, Connie is not going to be able to make it, financial issues and a whole bunch of other stuff, health issues. But a lot of the local descendants of Chatham are going to be here. They're going to be, it's going to be open to the public. It's going to be in Barkhamsted. It's going to be great. I think it'll be partially in the Barkhamsted Historical Society. I will give a tour of the site. So they're coming back, which just I think blows my mind. It's fantastic. Now to come back around and we'll open up for questions. As I said, the Tunguses are still here. We can't look at Native people as primitive, as throwbacks, as, you know, that sculpture, the famous sculpture of the Indian on the horse, and he's looking down, and even the horse is exhausted, and it's like the end of the trail. Bullshit. It's not the end of the trail. These people are still here. They may not be in the same places. They may dress just like us. They may be Christians. It doesn't make a difference. They still are the descendants of the native people, of America's first peoples. So the Tunguses today, they don't have a reservation in Wisconsin. They have a community center. Well, that's something. And this is from their website. The Brothertown came together. These are all the Indians who became Christians under the tutelage of Samson Occam. Brotherton came together in the 2nd century under the leadership of Samson Occam as a means of continuing its common cultural identity. The tribe descends from, Brotherton tribe descends from Mohegan, Pequot, the Western Pequot Eastern, that's different from the Mashantucket folks, the Niantic, the Narragansett, the Wotucket, and the Tungus tribes. So they are still here. Little sidebar. So Samson Occam is a brilliant man. He's Mohegan. And the plan was to build an Indian school in southeastern Connecticut. And he was so well spoken And people in England were so interested in Native people that he was sent to England to go on a lecture tour, lecture circle. And everywhere he was raising money and sending it back to Connecticut for an Indian school. You'll notice there's no Indian school in southeastern Connecticut. You know why? Because Dartmouth used that. That money was used to found Dartmouth College. The Reverend, who will remain nameless here, who was in charge of all this, took the money and ran up to New Hampshire and established Dartmouth. Ostensibly as a school for Native people, it's been in operation for a couple hundred years. I think they matriculated like a dozen Native people. And look, my oldest son went to Dartmouth. It's a great school, but I don't know, there's some regulations still for a Native American school in southeastern Connecticut. The thing I'll end with is a phrase from Lewis Mills, who wrote the Legend of Barkhamsted Lighthouse. So it's this wonderful poem about the lighthouse people. He said it expressly about them, but I'm going to steal that phrase and use it for Native people of the Farmington Valley. They are generations speeding onward in an ever-widening circle. The circle is wider and longer every year. It doesn't disappear, it doesn't vanish, and it's to those folks that I dedicate whatever the remainder of my career as an archaeologist here in Connecticut, here in the Farmington Valley, of helping them tell their own story. And that's my big finish for John. And if you can ask questions if you like. If I don't know the answer, I'll just make something up. Yeah, what do you want?
Is that going to be on the final?
Here's my colleague, Mike Park, who he knows the right questions to ask.
Tell why it's called Lighthouse.
Oh,
That's a good story.
That's an interesting story. All right, so, and we know that historically it really was called the Lighthouse. Side issue, when we started the project, I'll get to it, but they're always circuitous. I will get back around to telling you why it's called the Lighthouse. I actually received a piece of mail, a letter, from a graduate student at Columbia University. Ivy League school, one of the best schools in the country, the smartest students, who wrote me a letter having read about the Lighthouse community, saying he really would like to join in the work, in the research, because he has a real fascination for maritime history. I wrote him back saying, all right, first, look at a map. See where Barkhamsted is? 60 miles from the coast. And it's not so old that, well, that was when the ocean was a lot higher. No. It's called the Lighthouse. It's this wonderful story. It really was a metaphor employed by the stagecoach drivers. East River Road was part of the Farmington River Turnpike. And it was a little feeder road for the Albany Turnpike, Route 44. So when you were coming from Albany, you could take that, and the first sign of civilization of the sort were the hearth fires curling up from these small shacks and huts that were lived in by the Lighthouse people. And it was, even newspaper articles dating to the mid-1800s, even the early 1800s, say the stagecoach drivers referred to it as their lighthouse. At 5 miles to port was New Hartford. So then you could rest your horses, people could get a drink, people could rest, and then there's 25 more miles to Hartford and a whole bunch more miles to Boston if you go all the way up. So it was those guys called it their lighthouse. And the name stuck. There's a map, an 1873 map of Connecticut that has Barkhamsted, spelled incorrectly, by the way, with a P, an extraneous P. And if you look along the coast of that map, there are icons that are little triangles with like a light on top. So lighthouse, and those are all lighthouses, historical lights. Yep. The map maker put one of those in the middle of Barkhamsted. And it must have been really weird, right? They said, yeah, you did a lighthouse in Barkhamsted. What? Wait, what? Just trust us, just put one there. And he did, with no explanation at all. So it's cool that you got a 19th century metaphor. It was used as the name of the structure of the whole village. In 1858, a little girl is born to Solomon Webster and his wife Mary. Mary is a direct descendant of James and Molly. It's a granddaughter or great-granddaughter. One of you. And Saul is listed as a Mohegan Indian. Little girl is born, and if you look at if you've done any genealogical research, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Most people, in fact, when you talk about genealogical research, they roll their eyes. Oh my God! You sit there and you look at stuff. You have no idea how exciting it is when you say, "Wait, that's Saul Webster. I know who he is. Mary, she's a descendant." And in the column labeled place of birth, where every other kid on that list in 1858, April, May, is the place of birth is Barkhamsted, 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 Barkhamsted. She, Barkhamsted Lighthouse. So it's officially on the document. But that's not even my favorite part of the document. Every other kid on that list, it says race or color. W, 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 W. This little girl, whose father is a Mohegan Indian, whose mother has European and Native Narragansett blood. The town clerk wrote it for color, nearly white. You've all probably had that situation where you've had to fill out a form and it wants to know what your race is. Try nearly white next time. But I also can imagine the town clerk literally saying, "Oh, she's not black. She's not Indian. She's not white. I don't know, nearly white," which I think is so meaningless because I'm not white either. What color is that? It's like pinkish something or other. Anyway, other questions? And not these planted questions that I haven't talked about. Yes?
Can you talk more about the arrowheads? And did I understand right that the ones that come down and they groove in and then out are older than the ones that are curved? Can you talk about that?
Well, the ones that are the oldest points in North America.
And the ones that are curved are called points. That's how you
Here's the deal.
define that?
All right, nobody listen to this because this is secret stuff for archaeologists. A lot of times we don't know, is it an arrow point or was it a spear point or a dart point? So we make up a new term, projectile point. And what that means is, we don't really know because we're not sure. But generally speaking, the ones that are triangular and really small, which show up in the archaeological record 1,500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, we're calling those arrows because that sort of kind of makes the most sense. But then there are these other ones that have stems on them or notches on them, and they're bigger. Those usually, we're going to say, well, they're probably spear points, but we're going to just put them all in the general category of projectile points. The oldest of these are the ones that are called leaf shaped. They kind of look like a willow leaf, and on both faces, there's a channel, a flute, a groove, and that makes them thinner in the middle so that you can they're easier to haft onto a spear. Those are called, in some Clovis points, there's a subheading of those in the Southwest called Folsom. The Folsom points are found with prehistoric bison, and the Clovis points out west are found with mammoths and mastodons. But here, in Duchess Quarry Cave in New York, they're found an association with caribou. But then, basically, what you're looking at here is there is a plethora, a whole diversity of shapes and forms, and that's dictated by tradition, So it's not like one's better than the other, or one is better at a certain activity than the other. It's just that this is how, when I was learning to make spear points and watching my dad make them, that's how he made them. So I make them the way he did, and when I have a son and he sees me making spear points, he sees me make them the same way, and it's passed down from generation to generation. So it's tradition. We can have a whole Broadway show in which that would be one of the songs. Why do we make arrowheads like this, Dad? Tradition. But that's really true. In that, in Fiddler on the Roof, when they asked him, we Jews in the shtetl in Eastern Europe, we do this. Why do we do this? And Teddy goes, I don't know. But it's tradition. And so that's why I think there are so many different kinds, is that you end up with the spear points in the Farmington Valley tend not to look so much like the ones in the Connecticut Valley at the same time. There are these kind of fishtail shaped points that show up much later in the Connecticut Valley, But in the Farmington Valley, they're 5,000 years old. I show them to other archaeologists, they go, oh yeah, those are Orient fishtails, those are like 3,000 years old. Sorry, no. They're in the Farmington Valley where they are 5,000 years old. So they're not an infinite number of ways of making a spear point that's gonna work, but you know what? If they're thin, aerodynamic, sharp edges, sharp tip, there are lots of ways of having it onto a shaft, and they're all gonna be equally effective. I just made that. That's the best answer I can give you, yes.
Well, I make things up sometimes too,
Right.
and I may have made this up, but I have a recollection that at one point when you were doing a trip for the Watershed Association from the Pincho Sycamore, you said you thought that that tree had multiple branches as low as it did because it was the custom of the native people to snap a leader on the tree.
I did not know, that wasn't me, I didn't say that, but I think it was the guy, John, River Ride guy.
Was it right or wrong?
I have no idea.
Okay, it's a great
Not a
story.
tree guy. But no, it's a beautiful tree. I guess that one of the big branches fell off and Cater made a guitar out of it and they auctioned it off. I want that guitar. Just in case. If you ever run into that guitar, just kind of hanging out, say, oh, Kenny wants one.
I have some little posters made out of them.
No, I want a
That won't
guitar.
satisfy.
No, you're not gonna satisfy me. At this point, yeah, I mean, like it's late and everybody's, got bored 45 minutes ago. But I'll be around for a few if you want to ask me some questions after. But listen, I love doing this. You're a great audience. I applaud you guys. You guys, ha! That's great. Thank you very much.
For over 40 years, SCM has been the voice of our town,
bringing us together through local programming,
education,
and live broadcasts.
SEM isn't just about television.
It's about empowering our community,
ensuring our voices are heard during government meetings,
and celebrating milestones
like our high school graduations.
But today, SEM faces a challenge.
Our funding structure is based on television subscriptions.
And it's no secret, people have been cutting the cord.
With a shift to internet-only subscriptions,
SEM receives less revenue,
even though all our programming is freely available online.
We need your support.
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 Your donation can make a difference.
It will ensure that SCM remains open,
continues to educate our youth,
and keeps our community informed.
Thanks to SCM, I've been honing my creative skills, helping me work towards my college degree.
SCM is crucial for keeping our community connected.
SCM isn't just here to broadcast local events. They're actually preserving Simsbury's history.
Join us.
Join us in preserving Simsbury's voice.
Simsbury's voice.
Together we can ensure that SCM continues to thrive
for generations to come.
Visit our website
or scan the QR code on your screen to make your donation.
Every contribution
counts.
Thank you for supporting Simsbury Community Media,
where your town,
your schools,
and your government come together.